What's up, everybody? Charlie Marlow here on the Kenny Wallace YouTube channel. I just came inside. I was actually shoveling my snow in St. Louis, Missouri. We got a ton of snow, but I saw on my phone some crazy NASCAR news, and I'm just going to read it right to you guys from NASCAR.com. Basically, NASCAR dropping a ton of rule changes just about 20, 30 minutes ago. So the article, it's a 3-minute read. It's on NASCAR.com, so it's from them. And it's by Zach Albert. And I'll just basically read it for you. It's only about 3 minutes, but I'm talking about a ton of new rule changes for NASCAR. So here it is. Competition officials released updates to the NASCAR rulebook on Friday, including a measure that creates a new provisional starting berth, which would increase the Cup Series starting grid to a maximum of 41 cars for select races. The, quote, open exemption provisional rule was one of a handful of changes issued in a rulebook bulletin to the NASCAR industry Friday. That's today, of course. Other updates were made to the Cup Series damaged vehicle policy. That's the DVP, the process for granting waivers for playoff eligibility, and penalties for rules violations by manufacturers. That's basically kind of the subheadline. I'm just going to read this for you. It's only about 3 minutes. Okay, here we go. Competition officials compared the new provisional spot to the promoter's choice provisional that's used in some forms of short track racing to guarantee a starting spot for a special or invited entrant. The open exemption provisional, or OEP rule, would only become a factor if the entry list exceeded the Cup Series' current starting field maximum of 40 cars, and eligible drivers would need pre-approval by NASCAR on a case-by-case basis with racing experience and accolades carrying significant weight. So let me break this down for you. That's basically a big-time driver with star power from a different series could be added to the field to be the 41st car and wouldn't have to qualify. That's big. So we're talking about somebody coming from, let's say, F1, IndyCar, whatever it is, Helio Castroneves, right, with the Daytona 500. Based on this rule, he would be in. An OEP entry would be eligible for the race win, the trophy, and all-star race eligibility, but would not be eligible for championship points from that event, prize money, or playoff eligibility. The open exemption provisional takes on added focus for this season's Daytona 500. So I just talked about that, but they're getting to it now, which of course is February 16th, 2:30 Eastern on Fox, MRN Radio, SiriusXM, and NASCAR Radio, with several non-chartered open entries planned already for the Great American Race, and more expected to be announced soon. That's what I was talking about with somebody like Helio Castroneves, or again, maybe a big-time driver with name recognition that would add to the sport, coming from IndyCar, coming from F1, whatever the case may be. Okay. Among other updates in Friday's rule book bulletin, NASCAR officials updated the damaged vehicle policy, DVP, for the Cup Series starting this season, adjusting the rule that damaged cars that are either driven or towed to the garage will be out of the race. Starting in 2025, cars will be permitted to continue in the race after repairs in the garage. Officials will continue to maintain a 7-minute time limit, 8 minutes for Atlanta Motor Speedway events, for repairs made on pit road. Any repairs exceeding the 7-minute limit must be made in the Cup Series garage, where no clock will be kept on repair work. Teams will be penalized if a car leaves its pit box to rejoin the race and the DVP clock expires before it reaches pit exit. Any vehicle unable to be driven to pit road because of crash damage or flat tires will be towed to the garage. If competition officials grant a waiver for playoff eligibility, okay, so this is a new part of it. So basically the first part, as I told you, an exemption essentially for a big name driver from a different series. The second part is the DVP, the damaged vehicle policy change. And now here's the third part, and this is really interesting. If competition officials grant a waiver for playoff eligibility, so this is basically about Kyle Larson last year attempting the double with the Indy 500 and also the Coke 600. Then, of course, the weather happened and he wasn't able to make the field for the Coke 600. Okay. If competition officials grant a waiver for playoff eligibility, in some circumstances, that driver will forfeit any playoff points accumulated in the regular season. Such a driver would start the playoffs with a baseline maximum of 2,000 points in the reset standings. I read that to say, if what happened last year happens again, Kyle Larson, if he gets the waiver, would start with 0 playoff points. So playoff points will be forfeited if a waiver is granted after a suspension, also a suspension, or if a driver chooses to skip a race. That's basically the Kyle Larson rule. Playoff points would not be forfeited in the event of a medical absence. So there's the difference. A medical absence is different than a suspension, and it's different than Kyle Larson basically attempting the double. Missing a race for the birth of a child or a family emergency, or if age restrictions prevent a driver from racing a full season. So those things don't count. Medical absence, missing a race for the birth of a child or a family emergency, or if age restrictions prevent a driver from racing a full season. NASCAR officials clarified the penalty structure for rules violations made by OEMs, original equipment manufacturers. Such infractions may result in loss of manufacturer's points and or a reduction in wind tunnel testing time or computational fluid dynamics, CFD test runs. Penalties will be assessed for violating policies in place for vehicle testing, wind tunnel limits, event roster protocols, and code of conduct. Competition officials adjusted the wording for the 100% rule of performance obligations, changing the focus on competitors who artificially alter the finishing positions to competitors who manipulate the outcome of the event. Basically, that gets into last year with everything going on with Austin Dillon. But then, of course, at the end, when you have teammates helping each other get into the final race, that was the Christopher Bell and William Byron situation we had last year. So competition officials adjusted the wording for the 100% rule of performance obligations, changing the focus on competitors who artificially alter the finishing positions. That's the team play. To competitors who manipulate the outcome. So it's manipulating the outcome of the event. NASCAR officials also formally added changes to practice and qualifying procedures, which were introduced in December. So there you go. It's about a 3-minute read. I know I've been going for about 7.5 minutes, but this is right from NASCAR.com. It's right from the horse's mouth. It's from Zach Albert. I tried to read it to you and then break it down, but you guys should also go and do that yourself. And like I said, this is huge news, so I want to jump on. I actually have a meeting coming up in a few minutes, but this is huge NASCAR news. And basically, the headlines are the Promoter's Choice Provisional. So that's the big-time driver from a different series will now be able to be in an event. You would think if they're bringing credibility, name recognition, right? They're helping the sport. Somebody, a big-time driver from F1 IndyCar. And it would be a 41st car, okay? And NASCAR specifically talked about the Daytona 500, which makes you think the folks like Helio Castroneves and other people like that, where you would help NASCAR by entering a race, those folks will be in. The other headline is the DVP, the update to the damaged vehicle policy. There was a lot of talk about that last year towards the end of the season. And then also the waiver situation. So how I read this is, if you get a waiver for being suspended or skipping a race, like what Kyle Larson had to do because of the weather at the Indy 500, you would then start the playoffs with 0 playoff points right there. But it doesn't count if you had a medical absence, you're missing a race for the birth of a child or a family emergency, or if age restrictions prevent a driver from racing a full season. So basically, this new wrinkle is for folks who are granted the waiver after a suspension or if a driver chooses to skip a race. So there you go. Thanks for watching, you guys. Got about 600 of you watching right now, and I'll read a couple of your comments. I got to go here because I have a meeting, but I want to jump on quick. Rip in the Lip says, love the new rules. Ken Ruggles says, Project 91. Josh Bauer, what if there's more than one? Are you talking about the provisional? That's a good question. Will it be more than one for different races? A big race like the Daytona 500, would you have more than the 41st car? We'll find out more about all this. Let's see. We got video editor EB1. Love it. Let's just call it the Helio rule and move on. There you go. Ryan Champ Blaney. I love that rule. Here we go. Colby Cheesy, or an exemption for Truex. But I read this as non-NASCAR drivers, right? So we'll see how that goes. Obviously, Truex was a NASCAR driver forever. Now he's retired, but he's probably going to race a little bit here and there. Jeff says, let's go, Charlie. Brian Newton. Let's see. Brian Newton says, okay, did I understand that correctly? If the damage is beyond the 7 minutes, they can go behind the wall into the garage, make the repairs, and re-enter the race. That's on the DVP, damaged vehicle policy, and it's also 8 minutes at Atlanta Motor Speedway. I can't get into all this, folks, but like I said, if I were you guys, I would just read the article on NASCAR.com. It's only 3 minutes. And then also all the great reporters on Twitter, Jeff Gluck, Bob Pockrass, will further break this down. Let's see. We got the Hobgoblin. Why are they so against drivers trying to do the double? Well, NASCAR has to look out for themselves. You can still do the double, but if you miss a race like Larson did last year, you're going to start the playoffs with a severe disadvantage. Let's see. Justin Mean, NASCAR drivers should stick to NASCAR races, not getting another competitive series ratings. I think the double's pretty special, though, to me. I think if you can try the double once in your career, you got to do it. Jeff says F1 should stay over there. Let's see. The Hobgoblin. So NASCAR is all about the one-offs coming to their sport, but won't let their own drivers do that. Well, they will, but you're going to get penalized for the playoffs. But I get your point there for sure. Let's see. Short and sweet. Don't worry, these rules will change by June. Steve Everett, NASCAR is losing the fan base. IndyCar guy at Daytona will not save it. I think this helps. I think it brings eyeballs to the sport. So there you go. Everybody's asking about the rule changes. Folks, I'm gonna end the video. You can go back and watch the beginning here on YouTube. But basically, excuse me, three main points right now. And that is, to start with, you have the promoters choice provisional, which means a big-time driver from a different series comes to NASCAR. They wouldn't have to qualify. It could be a 41st car. And NASCAR specifically talks about the Daytona 500. So we can call that the Helio Castroneves rule or something like that. A big-time IndyCar driver, a big-time F1 driver. That's how I read it. Updates to the damaged vehicle policy. I'm not going to get all back into that. You guys can check that out. There's a lot of minutia to that. And then basically waiver playoff eligibility. If you get a waiver, if you're granted a waiver, right, for a suspension, or if a driver chooses to skip a race, that's like Larson last year where he missed because of the double, you will start the playoffs with basically no playoff points. You'll forfeit any playoff points accumulated in the regular season. But this doesn't count if you forfeit the event for a medical absence, missing a race for the birth of a child, or family emergency, or if age restrictions prevent a driver from racing a full season. So there you go. The big headlines are about the provisionals, the DVP, and new playoff waiver requirements, which essentially is changed now based on what happened to Kyle Larson last year. So there you go. Thank you, guys. I can't read all your comments because I got to get to a meeting. Thank you so much. Had about 600 of you watching, have 500 now. I'm sure Kenny Wallace will weigh in on this very, very soon. I haven't even checked X. He may already have, and I'll post that video here to the Kenny Wallace YouTube channel. Thank you very much. Have a great weekend. It's snowing here in St. Louis. It was a snow day. My kids are outside. My kids are off school. I was just shoveling the snow. Have a great weekend, everybody. And a comment also. What do you think of these new rule changes? See ya.